and 314 for a shooting at Century Theaters. They're saying somebody's shooting in the auditorium.
Roger, keep your fires west of the smoke. You're cleared hot. An officer hit. Send me the world.
Don't go over that fence. Don't go over that fence. Grab the shotgun again.
Welcome to Tactical Tangents.
Hey, welcome back to Tactical Tangents. This is Mike. This episode's brought to you in part by Point 6. Point 6 has mastered merino wool, and their products have outperformed their competitors in tests that measure moisture and evaporation. Their socks and base layers are made in the U.S., and you can use our discount code TACTANGENTS2019 for 25% off. Tonight, I want to examine a few ways that we measure progress when it comes to shooting. In one of our first couple episodes, we did about shooting. To be honest, I've learned quite a bit about shooting since then, even though it wasn't that long ago. And as I do with many things, one of my big challenges to our listeners is, especially if you carry a gun, whether it be professionally or just as a personal choice for self-defense, is to consider what metrics you're using when you ask yourself if you're good or if you're ready. And I put, my little quotey fingers around good or ready because those are not very specific and they're all relative to the context that you use it, which is why this can be difficult. So as I've gotten more experience and I've broken some of my own personal plateaus, I've had the chance to interact with more and more people in the industry and instructors out there who have done a better job of articulating some of those things and also helped me better understand some of those principles. So that has not only made me a better shooter and a better instructor, but it's also encouraged me to consider some of those standards and the ways that we measure our performance. One of those people has been John Johnston, who's also the host of Ballistic Radio. And that was one of the podcasts that helped shape and inspire what eventually became this project. So it's certainly an honor to have John here with me tonight. And in addition to hosting Ballistic Radio, John also runs a company called Citizens Defense Research, where he teaches a number of courses, and one course in particular that he runs is an entire day of tests and standards, which, among other things, is what we're going to talk about today. John, I appreciate you taking the time to talk with me and share your insights.
Yeah, no worries, man. So I do have to, small point of order. Melody Lauer actually runs the company, and I just go places and do things. So she is the driving force behind Citizens Defense Research, and I'm very lucky in that I get to work with and for her. So, but yeah, man, I super appreciate you having me on. It was a very nice surprise that you invited me. So thank you.
Awesome. And yeah, I know Melody helps with your other course, Armed Parent and Guardian, which I'm going to get into in a little bit too. In fact, I'm going to need to take that course because I have a kid due. Well, let's just put it this way. If I have to cut this interview short, that's probably why. It's coming up pretty quick. So I'm going to need to get in that. I need to get my wife into that course too, especially. So, and I know she is around for that. So to start off, what was the background and the philosophy that led you to design a whole course around tests and standards?
So an experience that was kind of frustrating for me, right, was that, so depending on what world you're in, I'm either a really good shooter or not very good shooter at all. And it sort of just depends on who you're comparing to, right, and what we're looking at. So, if you stick me in a USPSA match, I'm a middle of the road shooter. I'm not a GM. I'm not to that level. I'm not anything like that. Whereas if you compare me to, and I'm not saying this is a pejorative, but just to the tactical Timmy world, which is the world that I play in, I'm pretty okay. So it just depends, right? But what got sort of frustrating for me was I would go to a class, and I'd go to a class with super, super talented and very skilled instructors. And most of us, if we kind of know what we're doing, have had this experience before where we go to a class and we're doing things pretty well. We're not doing anything egregiously, out of line. And the instructor looks at us and goes, "Hey, that's good. Keep doing that." And then they move on down the line. And where the instructor, the way most classes are structured, needs to spend most of their time is with the problem student so that they can help get the problem student up to where they need to be. And that's super important. And I'm not, to be very clear, I'm not saying that's wrong. But from my perspective, as someone that's like, hey, I want to get better too. That doesn't help me very much as like a shooter that, once again, depending on the metric, middle of the road, high level, that doesn't really matter that much. I wasn't getting much individual attention one-on-one time. And I wasn't getting much feedback on like, hey, here's what you need to do to get better. So the entire idea behind tests and standards was that shooters get more individualized coaching than you do, as far as I know. So I haven't been to every class, but as far as I know, you get more individualized attention and coaching than any other one-day class, and frankly, more than most two-day classes. So the class is a 10-hour day, and the way the class is structured, almost everything you do before you ever do it as a group, you're doing it just by yourself, individually, with me watching, and I'm giving you individualized feedback. And I've found that most people really appreciate that and really like it, and say, hey, this is kind of an unusual experience compared to what I'm used to, and I really appreciate it being laid out this way. So that was kind of the point to the class, was that I wanted a vehicle for people to actually have an instructor watching them when they're doing something new, like, hey, I'm going to give you something new to do, and I'm going to watch you do it. And I'm not going to watch you do it with my attention divided amongst 10 other students. I'm going to watch you do it individually.
Right.
And that way it's not predicated on me being at the right spot on the line at the right time and seeing what you're doing. It's like, no, I'm going to see you do this, 3, 4, 6, 7 times, then give you individualized feedback, move on to the next student before we ever do it as a group. And like the group, when we do it as a group, the entire point there is like for you to be able to experiment on your own with whatever feedback I've given you and dial it in yourself without me chirping in your ear, which can also be detrimental. So that was kind of the idea going into it. And then the metrics themselves are like the things that I shoot. I've got a couple things that I know that we're going to do, but for the most part, the students drive the curriculum for the most part. So, and that kind of depends on range facilities. And also, actually the biggest factor is whether we have an indoor range or an outdoor range. And I know it seems like that wouldn't matter, but it kind of does. But assuming the weather cooperates and assuming the facilities cooperate, the curriculum, I don't know exactly what we're going to work on that day because I'm making the final determination based off of what the students tell me at the beginning of class when I say, hey, what's one thing you'd like to get better at with your shooting?
Yeah, and I think that's a valuable skill to have as an instructor, is to be dynamic and to tailor. If you have expertise in an area like that, to be able to adjust and adapt to your audience is a huge skill as an instructor, and that's hard to do. Especially, I think about a test and standards, just the way that you describe that. If you let's say pick a drill that you're going to do, it doesn't matter what it's called or what the standard is, but every student that runs through that, they might do really well in one and then really poor in the next. And if there's any trends within that class, you might have a student that goes in and says, oh, hey, I actually did better than I thought I would compared to the other people here, as opposed to the next drill where it's like, everyone else seems to be right up here and I'm kind of struggling, Sure. And so now you've got that ability to tailor your approach based on like certain levels of shooters that you're going to have in any given group, which I imagine is pretty varied, right?
Yeah, it is. And I think a really interesting question. So, and this is kind of the thing where we get into like philosophy, right? Like philosophy behind shooting and like what motivates people, what doesn't motivate people. And I think that there is value in metrics. And the best example I have of that is like if you were going to start a fitness program and told me, well, yeah, but I'm not going to track my lifts. Like, yeah, okay, let me know how that works, right? It's not going to work super great because you have no idea of what you're doing, and memory is fickle and stuff like that. But as far as, so one of the teaching points of the class specifically is I create situations where the expectation is, okay, you're competing against other students. And the situations that I create are literally anyone's game. So like there's a top shot for the class. And I've had it happen a couple of times now where, you know how in most classes you can tell pretty quick like who the one or two folks are that are going to be top shot in the class.
Yeah, there's always that guy, and then there's always that guy.
Right. Well, what's funny about how I've got this class structured is that the final thing we do determines whether, who the top shot of the class is, and it is literally anyone's game. And I've had it now a couple of times where we've had either M or GM level shooters shoot the last thing to determine the top shot of the class, and disqualify on it. And the person who won the top shot of the class, the person that at the beginning of the class, everyone is sort of looking at like, oh, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like they worked really hard, and then at the end of a class, like they're doing really better than they were at the very start. I've had that person twice now, different individuals, but like that archetype of a person beat the M or GM level shooter. Okay. I like that personally because something that I think is lost on a lot of people, especially when we start talking about skill, is there's a quote from Jeff Hall. And the quote is, there's an element of risk in every encounter. Okay.
I like that.
Yeah. And I like it too. I wish I had said it. I didn't, but I like to quote it. But the point is,
I still like to steal it, but
yeah, it's kind of the concept of any given Sunday, right? And oftentimes we get inside of our own heads as far as expectations of performance, good or bad. And that, there's another quote that I like a lot from Henry Ford, and like remove Henry Ford's politics or however you feel about Henry Ford. The quote is excellent. And the quote is, whether you think you can or can't, you're right.
Yep.
And you stop and think about that. It's like, oh, okay. So when we start like comparing ourselves to others, like I like comparing myself to me. Like, how was I on this day? Did I improve? Did I not? And the natural tendency is to compare ourselves to others. But oftentimes when we pick someone to compare to or pick someone to chase, we're not acknowledging how good that person actually is. Okay. And the best example I have of that is like, so guys that I hang out with and shoot with on a semi-regular basis are guys like Gabe White, Ernest Langdon.
Yeah. Also
there's there's a shooter named Kirk Clark who no one knows who he is, but he's as good or better than either of the two dudes that I just mentioned. Guys like Tim Herron. I've shot with Bob Vogel a couple of times. You Scott Jidlinski, you see where I'm going with this, right? And it's like, okay, if that's my metric and that's who I'm comparing to, awesome. That's a great drive to improve right there. But what I'm not talking about when I mention those names is percentage wise. So if we're just looking at the number of shooters there are in the world, okay, and especially with like a handgun, how many people can do what they can do? Maybe, so here, I'll be extremely generous. Let's say there's 1,000, and there's not, but let's say there was. Right. Let's say that there was 1,000 people that could shoot to the level of the folks I just mentioned. All right. It's like, oh, okay, there's 1,000 people that can do that. All right. There's 7 billion people on the planet. Okay. So
it's a math formula, guys. Keep up.
Yeah.
Keep up.
So I've got my phone in front of me. Right. And I will pull up my calculator because I'm interested. I've never done the math. But I'm super curious. So 1,000 people. How many zeros in a billion?
I was literally just thinking that to myself, like, God, I have to see. It's going to be.
I think 9.
Yeah.
Right.
It's going to be more than 7.
Percentage wise. So I did 7 billion or I did 70 billion. If I were good at math, I wouldn't be a firearms instructor, right? But percentage wise, okay, that works out to 0.0000143.
Right, closer to 0 than anything else.
Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there's 5 zeros in front of the first one. Okay. Tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s, 100,000. Yeah. All right. So 1/1,000,000%. Or pretty damn close to it. 100,000. Anyway, the point that I'm trying to make though is like when you're comparing yourself to people like that, that's great. And if that's how you improve, that's awesome. That's super good. But you're literally comparing yourself to the best in the world, or at least I am in that, in that formula.
Right.
All right. And is that useful? Yes, it is. But can it be detrimental? Yes, it can. So you need to have an understanding of what are you trying to accomplish? What does skill actually look like? And for most people, either they don't know what skill looks like even a little bit, or they know what skill looks like, but they don't understand how skilled that practitioner is. And both of them can be detrimental for different reasons. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. And the other thing it's not giving due credit for is all of the incremental little steps along the way, which, I think about it. It wasn't that long ago that I was like, okay, at my police agency, I can max out the state of Arizona qualification. I can max that out. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. I felt pretty good about that when that started to become a consistent thing for me. But it was like, I'm never settled with that. I want to tighten it up. And then at some point it's like, okay, this qualification no longer really is helping me get to the next level. And so you've got to find something else to get through that little plateau. And that's kind of what I mentioned kind of in the introduction there, is that you have to find something that's going to make you a little bit, and the steps along the way that people like those you named, I mean, there's a million steps between being, at the 50th percentile or whatever of people who actually have ever handled a gun and shot it, let alone, everyone in the world. But the 50th percentile, let alone getting up to that 30% mark, 25%, 10, 5, whatever. I mean, there's a lot of incremental steps along the way. And if you could just focus on one of those steps on any given day at the range or in any given class, that's big progress, potentially.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's just more of, frankly, the other thing that it takes away too from is when you don't acknowledge like how good those people are,
right,
is how damn hard they work to get there.
Exactly.
All right. It's like, and my least favorite thing is like, oh my God, this person is so talented. No, they're not.
No,
that's not talent.
Yeah.
That's really hard work. That's really hard work over a long period of time. And maybe there's some natural ability that comes into play. Maybe someone learns physical tasks more quickly than maybe someone else does. Oh, okay, I'll buy that. But I've yet to meet a virtuoso with a handgun to where like they picked the handgun up and knew how to do it right away.
Yeah, without any help or teaching or anything.
Yeah, not how that works. They worked really hard.
Right.
So, and the other thing it does too is when we say things like, "Oh, so and so is so talented," it sort of embeds in your mind this idea that, well, I couldn't do that. No, you could. You absolutely could. It's just going to take a while.
Right. And time and money and effort and all of those things.
Right. And then we get into like, is there value for you to even dedicate that time and the resources to that? I don't know. But is it possible? Yeah, it is. Absolutely is.
Yeah.
And here's one thing that was incredibly useful to me early on in my shooting career was something Spencer Keeper said to me. Way long time ago at this point. I did something dumb. I think I'd flagged myself on a draw. And this is many years ago, back when I was carrying strong side. And he watched me do it, and he's, watched me holster up. He's like, hey, you flagged yourself on that draw. I'm like, and he goes, and I'll never forget this. One of the most, like, you want to talk about someone telling you exactly what you needed to hear exactly when you need to hear it. I try and always give Spencer credit for this. He goes, you can be better than this. That's all he said. He didn't make a big deal out of it. He didn't try and make me feel bad about it. He's just like, you can be better than this.
Didn't try to make you feel bad, but you're probably thinking about that all day now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, at the time there was all sorts of weird mindset things that were going on. But like, as far as someone telling me, hey, you can be better than you are right now. Yeah, you know what? I can be, and I'm gonna. Yeah. And I did. And so I would challenge anyone listening to this right now that wherever you are right now, you can be better than where you are right now.
100%.
It just is going to take work.
Yeah. And I also like what you said about how necessary is it to get to that level, because, I realized somewhere in that same period of time where I'm like, okay, yeah, I can max out the Arizona qualification or whatever. And I'm okay. I'm no, I don't get paid to shoot other than at work, really. It's not like I go out and I do this for fun, and I have to pass the qualification, but there's no prize for being much better than that. But at some point, you have to have some personal accountability and ask yourself, is there anything that I could be spending my time more on than this? And for me, it happened to be, at some point, I said, okay, I can shoot pretty well, and I can keep going to the range, and I can get really, really good at shooting, but I also kind of suck at fighting. And I should probably be better at that. And then physical fitness, and then maybe I need to read up and study more on academic stuff or whatever it is. I mean, so that's part of that conversation that you have to have with yourself, I think.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing too is like, here's something that's incredibly unpopular to say, right? But and keep in mind, like, I make, like, one of my primary sources of income is teaching people to shoot better. Okay. But for most people that are concerned about, better preparing themselves to essentially not die, which when someone talks about defensive shooting, what they're saying is, I'd like to not die because I can't shoot well.
Right.
That's what they're saying. Right. How's your physical fitness?
100%.
And so, like,
or even just risk management, situational awareness, decision-making, judgment, those.
Sure. And frankly too, like, understanding of use of force law.
Yep.
So like, if I had to, frankly, if you said I could pick between a GM level shooter that had no understanding of use of force law or pre-assault indicators, all right, or I could take a C-class shooter that had a real solid understanding of use of force laws and also pre-assault indicators, which one do I think is better prepared to survive a violent encounter? Well, it's not the guy that can shoot the sub 2 second bill drill.
Right.
And there's, I can already see, it's kind of nice. This is your show. So I'm a little, I'm a little more willing to, upset your listeners and my listeners, but
we make a habit of that, actually. That's like one of our big points.
Oh, that's one of your habits? Cool.
Yeah, well, it's one of our big sayings here is to challenge your assumptions. And so we like to challenge people a little bit on their way of thinking. So it's all good.
I'm glad that I can help in my own small way to accomplish that, right? But as far as like shooting better goes, like, that's a worthwhile goal, because excellence, anything is a worthwhile goal. But as far as will that help you survive a violent encounter, I don't know. Could it? Absolutely. Absolutely could. But I certainly don't want to be one of the instructors that's out there essentially using fear-based marketing tactics to convince you to come spend money with me. Like,
Right.
I don't need to do that. I don't know, maybe I do need to do that, but I'm not going to, because I don't agree with that. For me personally, I'm not taking anything away from the instructors that do that. It's just not personally something that I am willing to do to get people to come to class.
Yeah.
So, and funny enough, like the tests and standards class that, is the primary class we're talking about, the working title of that class was Stupid Human Tricks. But I thought that would make people think that I wasn't taking it seriously enough, so I didn't title it that.
Right.
But like when I was writing notes on the class, like the header that I had all the notes under was Stupid Human Tricks.
I love it.
So yeah, so as far as like, does it have value for you? I don't know. The only person that can determine what has value to you is you.
Well, jumping back to the class, since you brought it up again, and to keep us kind of back on track, not that, we call ourselves Tactical Tangents, so tangents are cool. What have been the trends in the test and standards class? Is there, and maybe a better way to ask this, is there a certain test or tests that bring out the sort of things that you seem to spend more of your time on fixing or improving with people?
I have two things that I've got more than two that are original to the class, but I have two things that I absolutely know that we're going to shoot each class. One I start with, one I end with. The thing I start with is a thing called dot assessment madness, which is essentially a 55-round assessment shot on 2-inch circles at 3 yards. And it's funny because I post videos of it from time to time. And every time I post videos of it, I can set a watch to how long it's going to take the first comment to be, at that distance, how could you miss? And the answer to that question is very easily and very rapidly, because I watch people do it all the time.
Right.
So there are things that I see with that are continuing trends, and there are observations that I've made as far as the time it takes someone to successfully complete that, especially if they've never seen it before, is very indicative to me of whether or not they have automaticity in their shooting ability. And I assume
that's a completely different thing than dot torture, because it sounds similar, but obviously it's more rounds, and I'm not familiar with the one that you mentioned.
Yes. Well, the way dot assessment madness works is on a Langdon Technologies target, there's 2-inch circles on either side of that target, hung vertically. So on the left side of the target is 1 through 5. On the right side of the target is 6 through 10. And the way that is set up is at 3 yards with no more than 15 rounds in the gun. And it's set up for double stack guns. You can run it with less than that, but you're at a competitive disadvantage at that point. That's sucks to be you, right? But no more than 15 rounds in the guns, and reloads that have no more than 15 rounds, and all reloads need to be done on an empty gun. I give people a total of 60 rounds, and that's so that if they encounter a malfunction, they can fix it. Or if they have a brain fart and decide to fire more rounds, it's kind of enough rope for them to hang themselves with either way, right? But what happens is on the beat, you draw fire 1 on the number 1, 2-inch circle, transition to the number 10, fire 10, transition back to the number 2, fire 2, so on and so forth until you've fired 55 rounds. And then reloads happen when the reloads happen. And it seems simple, and it is simple. It's not easy. And there's lots of reasons why it's set up the way that it is. And then there's lots of reasons why I call it an assessment and not a drill, because frankly, drilling it on a regular basis would actually be detrimental to it. But using it as an assessment, maybe quarterly, I think will tell you a lot about where you're at. But the point is, I notice all sorts of trends with that. And where people have problems and things like that can be very telling to the instructor, especially if you know what you're looking for. So, that's one of the things that we do that I'm sort of tracking performance on after I've taught 20 or 21 of these. I'd have to go back and look in the last 12 months. So it's been a pretty popular class. So I've gotten to run it a lot, which is kind of nice. And I'm very grateful and lucky for that opportunity. I'm running another one in a couple of weeks here in Las Vegas. But the thing that we end with is something called the test with no name, which there's a luckygunner.com YouTube video about it if people want to go and look it up. And that explains it pretty well. But essentially, you're firing at a big target, then a really small target, then a big target, then a really small target. And it's done at 5 yards. And when I say really small target, I mean a 1-inch square for time. And if you don't hit the 1-inch square either of the 2 times you run it, either of the 2 times you shoot at it, it's a DQ.
Ooh.
So, yeah, you hit the 1-inch square or you don't. And that's what determines top shot for the class. And funny enough, if everyone DQs on it, they get 2 chances to shoot it. There is no top shot for the class. I've had that happen twice now. So, as far as like trends that I see, how people choose to modulate speed is detrimental to the outcome that they desire. And I know that sounds incredibly vague, but
you're thinking caps, kids.
Well, so the best example I have of this is something I stole from Ernest Langdon, something he said that I use quite a bit. I try and attribute everything to whomever I got it from, assuming I remember who I got it from, but I remember who I got this from. But he said something in class I was in once that I liked a lot, and I've used it for a lot of stuff, and that's the front sight is the gas pedal. Okay, so when you shoot, what determines whether or not you shoot are my sights where they need to be when I press the trigger. So it's not my mechanical ability to reset the trigger and fire the gun. It's, do I see what I need to see?
Right.
And how most people choose to modulate speed is they'll go like, well, I need to slow down, or I need to speed up. And they'll say either one. And the funny thing is, if you're just shooting what you see, as soon as you see it, speed sort of modulates itself, and there's no input from you on it either way, because you're just shooting what you see. And that's very beneficial when you start getting into the concept of like a process focus versus an outcome focus, which is something I've talked with Gabe White a lot about. And that's not a concept original to me. I actually heard it from him first, but I stole it with a quickness, and I talk about it now. So, but the point being, I like dot assessment madness, and I like to test with no name because there's some of the clearest indicators I have as to whether or not, as an instructor, just watching the shooter perform, whether or not people are shooting their sights or they're shooting when they think they should be shooting versus when they see what they should be seeing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's interesting. And when you frame it around results versus process oriented stuff, and I think about results versus process orientation when it comes to things like like use of force policies and stuff like that. And that it's, when you think about it like that, it's interesting because if you have a drill or an assessment, like you said, and you're framing it around, look, if your front sight's got to be on this 1-inch square, sometimes depending on, I think about just at my level, my skill level, and I'm not saying that's particularly good or bad. I'm just saying like my personal experience is I put the gun out, and how fast I can hit that 1-inch square is strictly a matter of when I can get my sight there and my trigger where, prepped where it needed to be. And those things all line up at the right. And so sometimes it's very, very quickly if I just happen to present the gun just right and the trigger's prepped just in time and whatever. And sometimes it's it takes me longer. And so thinking about it in the lens of results versus process kind of has my wheels turning. That's something I'm going to have to pay a little bit more attention to, I think, next time I go to the range.
Well, so the best way that I have to explain this, so I talk with a lot of the I've talked with Scott Shizlinski and Gabe White about this a lot, and some other people as well. But the best way I have to explain this is if you try and force an outcome to the detriment of the process, the outcome is generally not what you want it to be. Okay, so
right. Makes sense.
The sheer act of trying to force the outcome almost ensures that you get an opposite outcome. Whereas if you just focus on what you need to do and don't worry about the outcome, even a little bit, the outcome tends to take care of itself. And here's a simple example so that, it can sort of be conceptualized for the listeners, for you, for anyone, 1,000 years from now comes across this and like, oh, okay. If I say to you that, so let's take the draw stroke. All right. And I understand that, traditionally that's taught in a 4-count or 3-count draw. And I'm not saying whether or not it should be. I'm just saying it is.
Typically.
Right. So let's say that there are 4 parts to a draw stroke. And I'm not saying that, but let's say that there are, hypothetically. Okay. And for you to draw the gun, you've got 4 things that need to happen to consider the gun drawn well. Well, if I put you under an artificial time constraint and you now decide to go fast, like I want this to be fast. And the way that you choose to go about that in forcing this outcome is like, okay, I know there are 4 things that need to happen here, but I'm only going to do 3 of them. Do you think that would negatively affect the outcome? If 4 things need to happen, are required, and the way that you choose to try and shortcut that process is by removing a step, would that negatively affect the outcome?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the discussion that has to take place next is that extra item actually necessary?
Yes. So in the constraints of this example, it is. It absolutely is. I'm not trying to trip you up. Like I'm just like, I'm asking the question. If I give you 4 things that need to be done,
right, to
get a successful outcome, and you feel pressure or whatever, and go, I want to be fast. I need to be fast. And you end up removing one of those steps.
Yeah,
did you get a successful outcome?
Nope.
No, you didn't. What does that look like in practicality? I'll tell you exactly what it looks like. How many times have you seen or experienced yourself someone trying to go fast and they flub their draw?
Mm-hmm.
Why did they flub their draw?
All the time.
Well, generally, it's because they did something like miss clearing the cover garment all the way, or they clear it low and get it caught on their hand or something like that. And that is the best practical example I have of the difference between an outcome focus and a process focus. The correct way to go fast is to not think about going fast, once you learn how to do it. I'm not talking about in the training environment where you're trying to work speed so that you can get your hands quicker, because I know there's going to be someone that listens to this and be like, John said smooth is fast and fast is smooth. No, I'm not saying that.
We did a whole episode making fun of that, by the way.
No, that's not what I'm saying even a little bit. What I'm saying is, so not in practice mode, not in pushing for speed mode where you're literally trying to make the wheels fall off. I'm saying in, what some people will call match mode, other people will call performance mode, whatever, you're playing for money, you're playing for blood, you're playing in that environment. That's not where you're trying to develop new skill. That's not where you're trying to push the wheels to come off. You're just trying to go as fast as you can.
Right.
And how do you do that? You do that by performing all the steps of the process perfectly, as fast as you can.
Right.
But
there is such a thing as smooth.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say we talked about this. I mentioned that we did an episode kind of making fun of that slow is smooth is fast thing, and we made fun of it, but we kind of talked about a little bit of the idea of maybe where it came from, and a lot of it is smoothing some of those friction points out in your own head so that you can transition from step 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 quickly.
Maybe. Where that example comes from most of the time is like people learning how to play music.
Right.
Like that, as far as I know, and I could be wrong on the etymology behind, where this was introduced in the firearms world, but I know where it comes from in the musical world, because I was a musician at one point. And you practice really hard stuff, slow at first on a metronome, and you speed it up. So, you work it slow so that you can get your hand position, stuff like that, correct. And then you work up to it, whether or not that makes sense inside of the shooting community. Fast is fast, smooth is smooth, and they can be the same thing or not the same thing.
Right. Slow is still slow.
Here's something that, something that is an original quote to me, and something I say in class, or at least I try and say in every class. Speed is an adjective that does not determine the correctness of an action.
True.
So
yeah, I like that.
Yeah. So if we, if you look at like a guy like Young Lee, right, when he says is it takes as much time to fire a miss as it does a hit, and vice versa.
Yeah.
Right. But I can do the correct thing really fast, and I can do the wrong thing really slow. And the speed I do it at doesn't have anything to do with whether or not it was right or wrong. So one of the things that I run into a lot is people will mess one of these up and go, oh man, I just need to slow down next time. I go, stop. Nope. Hold on. You slowing down isn't going to make this, just slowing down is not what fixes this. Doing it right is what fixes it. And how do you do that? Well, you focus on a different part of the process, and you do that part of the process correctly. Now, that might equate to you doing it slightly slower, though most of the time it actually doesn't, at least in my experience. But you slowing down is not what made this better.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. So yeah, I get it. You're not focusing on the speed of it so much as whatever step it. And I know it gets real nuanced real quick here, but it makes sense. If you're performing all of those steps perfectly, then you're getting it right. And if you do them perfectly quickly, then it doesn't matter, because perfectly is perfectly, right? Or correct is correct, or whatever. So if you're focusing on that one aspect of it, it's not that you're focusing on the speed of it so much as, it might slow you down, but you're focusing on that particular step or portion of it. Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah. So the whole thing is as far as, and so it's been a really long day. So I apologize. So I'm glad that it's called Tactical Tangents, because my mind is wandering somewhat. And I lost my train of thought. I apologize. But the entire point of that in general was as far as what makes us good or what makes us bad, or how do we get those things, and when do we do all that? Most of the things that people think about how all of this works, I think a lot of people are focusing on the wrong thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I like and again, I really do appreciate the way that I've gotten to interact with guys like you and hear the way that you articulate some of those things, because, you get out in this world of, and we'll just use shooting as one of many disciplines, and there's so much information out there. It's drinking through a fire hose, and to if you talk to the right people, you hear the right things that make things click. And when I hear you talk about the results versus process thing, it really makes that part of it click, specifically related to speed. I think that was just for me, and granted, I'm not one of my listeners. We're doing the show here, but that's something that I'm going to take from this, and I appreciate getting the chance to hear that from you.
Yeah, no worries.
Real quick, I do want to talk about your other course before we run out of time. I know you've been out teaching all day. Speaking of teaching, but Before I do that, I want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor, Right On Optics, for supporting the show. Right On is a veteran-owned company, and their products have an unconditional lifetime warranty. So if you're in the market for a scope, red dot, or binoculars at a great value, be sure to check them out. You can use our discount code TACTangents for 15% off. And if you have a military public safety background, give them a call. They'll hook you up. So before I waste all of the time that I have with you, John, I do want to talk a little bit about the other course I mentioned. I got a kid coming real quick here, and you've got a course that you and Melody have a course built specifically around being an armed parent or guardian. Can you just cover in a nutshell what that's about?
Sure. Most of the classes that we talk about are, so inside of the training community, are based around either we're by ourselves and from the bushes appeared a clearly defined threat that is generally somewhere along the lines of shooter ready, stand by, build ready. And that's cool. And like, I've been to those classes and I like those classes, and those classes are valuable. But it doesn't always work that
Turns
way.
out.
And I'll tell you, the first time you're walking around in public and you're sleep deprived, and just you wait, you're going to learn. So you're sleep deprived in a way that you've never been sleep deprived before. And you've got this, you got this child with you, and it's like, what if I get into a shooting now? What does that look like? And people are like, well, that never happens. Well, yeah, it does. I've got video of it more than once. Okay. So I know it's a thing because, like I said, I've got video of it. And then it just sort of goes from there. And the other thing too is, like, if you think about, a lot of people think that this is a child specific course, and it's not. It's you're around someone that you feel responsible for, either a loved one, family member, or a close coworker, somebody that does not carry a gun and is essentially a non-combative, but you're with them and something happens. And how does that complicate the situation? And more importantly, how are our natural responses or natural inclinations or tendencies, can they actually put our loved one at more risk? And the answer is they can, if we do it wrong. And it sort of just goes from there. So the class is essentially, how do I determine what's going on, and how do I select the best course of action for how I want to solve that problem? And it's very much here's some considerations, but you're the one that's going to have to figure this out, because we're not going to be there. Like, your shooting is going to be an individualized event where you've got to make good choices, right? And we're not going to be there to be able to help you with that. We're going to give you some principles and some guidelines, but what we're trying to do more than anything, to steal the term from Will Petty of Centrifuge Training, who's an excellent instructor, safe shooters for unsafe environments. And that's essentially what we're trying to do. It's a very interesting class. We challenge some of the preconceived notions people have about, how do you, work in these environments, what's important, what's not important. The other thing too is it's peer reviewed. This is not stuff that we came up with on our own. It was not created in a vacuum. At the end of the lecture, we've got an attribution page that's got, I'd have to go look, 20 or 30 names on it. These are all people that directly or indirectly helped with the class. We've tried to invite folks that we respect out to the class to, hey, can you take a look at this and let us know what you think? And, is there anything that we need to improve, not improve? Guys like Paul Sharp, Claude Werner, Chuck Haggard have all seen the material, offered input on it, and it's constantly evolving. Hopefully we're just trying to get people to think about things that they've never considered before.
Yeah, I love the originality of it, and it's cool that you guys are doing something that's unique, and it's not just another, tactical. You mentioned Tactical Timmy earlier, which I'll have a follow-up question on that in a second. But those sorts of classes seem to be more and more popular these days, and I get it; they're cool, but they're not necessarily practical. And I'll use the example of police officers. Cops, I'm not going to say they get a lot of training. Most cops are barely competent, or they're just competent enough. They're not necessarily pro shooters by any stretch. And I dance a line there to not insult any of my cop peers that are listening to this, but also to remind them that they don't have a ton of training when it comes to firearms. But the training that they do have is all built around a duty holster, duty gear, and duty on duty. And that is, when it comes to concealed carry, how much training do they get? Almost none. I mean, it's like, and so the context is something that in the terms that you mentioned about the armed parent and guardian, it's principles to follow, it's things to think about, and we're talking about problems to solve. The problems are different in a concealed carry context than they are in a on-duty context. And then, like you mentioned, when you get into situations like this, when you're around other people that you care about or you feel obligated to protect, and they are, quote-unquote non-combatants or whatever. So I love that you guys are doing that. About the Tactical Timmy thing, and this is something that I think is also relevant to not just the CCW crowd, but also to anyone that is big into self-defense. You've obviously made, you're living your career out of the shooting and self-defense realm.
Sure.
When you're teaching this stuff to a lot of these people, and I think about it in terms of the armed parent and guardian, and for my context, some of the classes that I've done, on the side away from my day job, have been related to active shooters in places like, churches or workplaces or those sorts of things. And just recently I've kind of started to get into that. And you have to have this conversation with people like, hey, I know we're talking about this like kind of scary, dangerous stuff, but you have to understand that you're more likely to be killed by heart disease or a car accident in America than you are these other things. So I guess my question that I want to lead you into in our last few minutes is that do you ever have this conversation come up where you have to talk to people about like, look, guys, we want you to train, we want you to be serious, but like there's a line that you have to ride about being too paranoid and too, survival oriented? I mean, is that something that you come across a lot? I mean, the guy that I'm talking about, right? The Tactical
Sure.
Timmy, that guy.
Yeah.
Like, what do you say to that guy?
I don't. So frankly, whatever people find that is salient or relevant to them, I don't like to discourage that. However, but there's and I can't remember exactly what she said, but I'm going to paraphrase it and hopefully I get it really close. But Melody Lauer said something really, really insightful once, and I thought it was just kind of brilliant. And that was, make sure that in your efforts to protect your life, you don't forego a life worth protecting.
Yeah.
So we all know there's people, well, if I can't carry a gun there, I'm not going.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. If you're happy with that, cool. You're missing out. You're missing out on life experience that you won't otherwise have. And like, if that's your math, that's your math. I'm not telling you you're wrong. But as far as, the joke, the running joke is always like, well, anyone that does does what I do, is just well prepared. Anyone that does less than what I do is ill prepared. And anyone that does more than what I do is just crazy. right?
Yeah.
You know, and
we're really
there's a lot
well
of that.
balanced there.
What was that?
We're really well balanced there.
Yeah. So as far as what the answer is to that, like, I don't know. As far as, you know, I can argue either side of this, probably pretty convincingly, right? You know, and if we say the guy that is super, super concerned about like these sorts of lightning strike events, well, you know, there's a quote from Colonel Cooper: "Statistics are cold comfort when you find you've been struck by lightning." Accurate, true.
Yeah.
But then when we look at like the mathematical likelihood of something like you're going to be in a Mumbai style attack, yeah, man, sometimes it's not your day.
Right.
Like, and that's kind of, as far as what the answer is to that, I don't know. I don't know. You know, everyone's math is different and everyone's risk assessment is different. And, here's one thing I will say, like, I have noticed this trend, and I certainly was one of these guys. So like at one point I was pushing 300 pounds, you know, somewhere in there, but I could shoot real good. But it's like, what's going to kill me? Like the fact that I can't get my bill drill under 184 or the fact that, you know, my blood pressure is dangerously high and I'm morbidly obese. And well, why would I focus on this one thing? So if I'm actually concerned, like I'm actually concerned, like, oh, you know, I want to be well prepared to defend my life. So I'm going to concentrate on this thing that I happen to like anyway, and it's pretty easy for me to do well. Versus here's this thing that I know for a fact is taking years off of my life and is going to be a pain in the ass to fix. Well, so when I have the conversation with people and they're like, essentially ordering their latte from Seoul, you know, it's like, cool. Can you run a mile?
Right.
You know, and some people can, and if so, it's like fine. But like, you do you. Yeah, but it's just more of like, actually be honest in what you're doing here. And for most people, the preparation is the hobby. You know, there was another trainer that, you know, I don't need to name anyone specifically because I'd rather not. But there was another trainer that said something along the lines of calling people to go to gun school hobbyists. And he said it as a pejorative, but frankly, you know, it's just an accurate statement. Like a lot of the people that do this as a hobby, and the preparation is the hobby.
Right. They like going to the range. They don't like going to the gym.
Yeah. And it's like,
I agree.
You know, well, so it's more of, it's like, I'm not going to make fun of anybody's hobby. Like I do hot yoga. That's like, you know, if you made me pick between I'm going to go to the range or I'm going to go and do hot yoga, I'm going to go do hot yoga. Like I personally enjoy that more, but shooting for me is work at this point. Like it's my job. And I enjoy my job, and don't get me wrong, I'm incredibly thankful to have the job that I have. And thank you so much for anyone listening that's helped, you know, allow me to do that and help me support my family that way. I'm not ungrateful. I really appreciate it. But as far as like what I want to do in my free time at this point, it's not shoot. Right. You know?
Yeah, I could totally relate to that as a cop. Like, yeah. And of course, I say that as a guy that now runs a arguably project that's intended for professional development. But, you know, I've got my own motivations for that. But you know, it goes back to what you said about having a life worth protecting, and the reason that
Melody said that. I did not say that.
But you mentioned it in the show. But yes, credit to Melody, of course. Melody, hats off to you. I love the quote. But the reason I bring it up is because when you think about, and I'm not just saying this because I'm about to have a kid, though I am. I say it in the context of, you know, I've done some of these classes now with these teachers, and we have to have that conversation of, what are you going to do if you have a class full of second graders and this happens? And that's and I'm not telling you that to scare you. I'm not saying, like, I don't want to make you paranoid. I don't want you to have to worry about those things. I want you to think about it now, so that that's a conversation you've already had and you've already thought about, so that you can rest comfortably knowing what you're going to do. And and I think that's an important context for anyone that's serious about self-defense, in whatever context it is. But, that's what brings it to mind, and kind of why I asked. Yeah.
So what you're talking about, and I know we're running up on the end of the show, but just to give people like something to consider, when you're asking people those things, what you're doing is giving them a parking spot in their head for it, as William April would call it. There's someone that everyone should go train with. Okay. But, people talk about the OODA or OODA, though it's not an OODA. And Boyd hated the term OODA, apparently. But when we talk about like the OODA loop, what we're talking about is recognition prime decision-making models.
Right.
All right. And when you're making, when you're looking at like pre-need decision-making, you're not ever going to know exactly what you're going to do in any given situation. But hopefully what you've done is created several robust responses, and you select the one that is most contextually appropriate for the situation you find yourself in once you recognize the situation you find yourself in. Where people get it wrong is not recognizing the situation they find themselves in soon enough. So as Paul Gomez, the late Paul Gomez would have said, the problem most people have is they don't get violent enough soon enough.
Right.
That's because, what was that?
I see that with cops. We talk a lot about de-escalation, and I tell people sometimes the fastest way that you can de-escalate is by escalating more aggressively.
Yeah. To an appropriate level. You're not going to respond with a disproportionate level of force, but the point that I'm making is so where this is valuable for everyone is, giving yourself the most looks at the other side's playbook, which is essentially when you're doing stuff like watching YouTube videos of these attacks, the active self-protection page or any of the other, pages that look at stuff like that, or even just the footage itself, you're letting the most powerful pattern recognition machine ever created, aka your brain, get more information, so it is more quickly able to recognize patterns. And then what you're doing when you're going and getting training, hopefully, when you're going and getting good training, is getting contextually appropriate things to apply in those situations once you recognize that you're in one of those situations.
Yep.
And where people get it wrong, or where people run into trouble, is in the time it takes for them to recognize what's going on, they've already lost.
100%.
Yep. Yeah. So I don't know if that answered the question or not, or if I completely took it a different direction.
No, it does. And I, and like I said, it was kind of a esoteric or whatever question, but you mentioned the tactical Timmy thing, and you see these guys that, and I most often I see it in new cops, these guys that come in and they're real, they're great. They're eager. They're enthusiastic. They take training seriously. They try to get as much of it as they can. But I imagine you see the same sort of thing in some of these other classes. I know, like, every time I go to like the local gun shop, and I'm not bashing any particular gun store here in town, but you go to a local gun store and you talk to one of these guys, and you could tell they take some of their stuff pretty seriously, and you're like, man, you should get like a hobby. Like maybe not this for a little bit, and just relax a little bit and think about the big picture, I guess, is just something that and like you mentioned, it's not to say that anything that you're doing is wrong. It's just to make sure that you're, to go back to Melody's thing, living that life worth living, and not get too wrapped up in any one thing. And so in the context of public safety and people that we tend to cater to, a lot of professional development types, is to think about that and not make life all about work and stuff. So,
well, so one of the things is, and to be clear, this is the opinion of someone that is not a cop. Okay. So take that for what it's worth. But, I think that if you're in that profession, right, the thing that you need to understand is, and we could have a long conversation about what the job of police actually is. And the job of police is to catch people after they've broken the law, right? Your guys' job to prevent crime. If you do it, that's great. But when you really look at what's going on there, the job of police is to catch lawbreakers after they've done it. And anything other than that is just sort of gravy.
Right.
Okay. And the thing, though, is, the job is to catch people after they've broken the law. But the expectation is someone is going to pick up the phone and expects you to come and save their life. They expect you to save their life.
Yep.
That they're relying on you to. Now, whether or not that's your responsibility, I don't know. It depends what kind of person you are and why you got into the line of work that you got into. I'm not offering a comment one way or another on that. But, the issue that I see is, and I'm very lucky in that I've gotten to train law enforcement, both the local and federal level. And pretty much generally the folks that I work with, in that environment, they are in it to win it. Okay. They know exactly what they signed up for and they're in it to win it. But I've also met, not generally at training classes, but just like in day to day, and everyone knows them. The cops, it's like, the benefits on this are pretty good, and I think I look pretty good in the uniform, and I guess they make me carry a gun, but I'm never going to need that. And, I like my job.
Mm-hmm.
And at face value, there's nothing wrong with that. But I question, and I don't know, but we can look at the Broward County Sheriff's Deputy, the school resource officer.
Oh boy.
And, a lot of people say, well, that's cowardice, whatever. I physically don't think he was able to go into that school, just because of temperament, right? I don't know. A better person to ask would be William April. I bet he'd have a more interesting opinion on that as a mental health professional. And we talk about low responders, high responders, and things like that. But the thing is if you're putting yourself in the position where you are expected to be the one that goes in and keeps the kiddos from getting murdered, how much off time do you really get?
Yeah, enough to be ready for that, probably.
Yeah. And there's a quote from a movie, and the movie escapes me, but the quote's great. You've had your entire life to prepare for this moment. Why aren't you ready?
Right.
So, I don't know. For a private citizen, how seriously do you need to take stuff? I don't know. I'm not you.
You potentially have the rest of your life to figure it out, right?
Right. But as far as if you choose to put a uniform on and the expectation is that it's your job to go and save people, I know how seriously I want the guy that stands outside of my son's school to take it.
Yeah, no kidding.
And I pick my son up at school, and I talk to the school resource officer every day, and he's a good dude. He's a good dude that takes his job seriously. And every time I'm there, I shake his hand and I talk to him. I ask how his day is and stuff like that. And in the back of my mind, I'm just like, thank God that, if, God forbid, anything happens at my son's school, this is the guy that's there. He's a guy that I would want to have show up, right? But not everyone's that fortunate. And that's pretty rare. So for the coppers that are listening, just think about, why did you get into this, and how seriously do you take it, and what's off time for you? and make your own decisions. Just like anything, you make your own decisions. It's just, I think everyone's mash should be a little bit different. You know what I mean? Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, it's balancing all things. And to be clear, it's not just cops that listen to this. I know that's, we kind of talk a lot about cop stuff, but I think for anybody, I mean, and it doesn't have to even be shooting or self-defense, survival or crisis management, managing, any kind of emergency or whatever. I hope that people take the time to contextualize whatever it is that they do. And if they are putting in work to prepare for something, it could be an earthquake, a tornado, a house fire, I don't know, whatever. But contextualize it. Make sure that you are paying attention to the situations that you're likely to face. And I think that's what's cool about the Armed Parent and Guardian class that John and Melody do. Tests and Standards, I think, is good because it lets you ask some questions about what areas, within your shooting skill set you need to focus on or what really matters. And I think I imagine, and I haven't taken it, but I imagine that class asks some of those questions. Hopefully one of these days I can get into it that we can, I can make my own, we can have that conversation better, but hopefully it's making people think, hey, how fast is fast and how accurate is accurate and how much does that matter for me? Am I ready? Am I prepared? Those are some of those questions that I think you need to apply to your own reality because it varies for everybody, I think.
Well, so here's the scary part is we are searching for certainty in something that by its very nature will always be uncertain.
True.
So like how fast do you need to be? I don't know, and I can't tell you. And anyone that can is lying to you. Like how good do you need to be? I don't know. Nothing matters until it does. So, and at that point, it's like anything. You're placing a bet, and if you're right, you win, and if you're wrong, you lose.
Yeah.
And that's all this is too.
All right, guys. Well, I hope you got something out of this. We wandered quite a few different directions that I was not expecting, but that's what we do here. And I also love that John even brought up, and John, you might not know this, but we talk a lot about John Boyd and the OODA loop, and specifically that he hated the term OODA loop and he preferred OODA, but we're lazy, so we do it sometimes anyway. But in any case, I love that we touched on it. Guys, please go check out the Mantis and thank them for their support. We talked a lot about tests and standards in this episode, and of course, very few things will replace going out and getting professional instruction and coaching. So obviously go check out John's classes, but in the meantime, one good way to supplement some of that stuff is the Mantis. It's a great tool. Again, it's a supplement, so you have to make sure that you're using it appropriately, but it's a good way to get feedback, especially if you're working on dry fire at home with no one there to watch what you're doing. So go check them out at mantisx.com. Thank them for supporting the show. If you want to support us directly, you can head over to Patreon, give us $1 for new episodes. $1 will help us keep doing what we're doing. Be sure to check back on the 1st and the 15th for new episodes. If you want to find us on social media, we are at Tac Tangents. And if you want to reach out, you can also email us info@tacticaltangents.com. John, you got any last thoughts?
Try and be nicer to other people. That's something historically I was not super good at, and I've tried to make an active effort to be better at it, and it has improved all areas of my life. And the other thing that I will say too is that just try and have fun.
Yeah.
A lot of this it's very heavy stuff, it's very serious stuff, but to sort of piggyback on Ellie's thing, like life is too short. It's going to be over way sooner than you think it's going to be. Chances are a lot of the stuff that we get spun up on doesn't actually matter, and we ignore a lot of the things that actually do. So tell the people you love that you love them. Spend time with people because you don't know how long they're going to be there for, and try not to sweat the small stuff.
I love that. Awesome. Well, thanks again for being here, John.
Yeah, no worries, man.
All right, good talk.